but also have to actually. I'll check on my phone if I'm live. But also have to actually. I'll check on my phone if I'm. Oh, yeah, I am live because I just heard myself. I just heard myself again. Okay. Cool. Okay. Welcome everyone. Today we have Stephen Tavener. Welcome. I actually wanted to start from when we met, but I don't remember how we met. I think I think it was just on Facebook, right? I think it was just through.
Yeah, probably Abstract Nation, maybe.
Yeah, from the Abstract Nation Facebook
and
group.
I started organising the board games in London, the Abstract board
Yeah,
games.
the meetup. I think we'll. Oh yeah, but to organize the meetup, we first had to find each other somewhere. Like, yeah, I think it was through the Facebook group. I think we'll talk about this again later because it's always a typical question how to get more people into the abstract game community, and there's always there's always a discussion about what's the best way to do it and what people see in it and why people don't see what we actually see. Anyway, but yeah, so why are we having a chat? I mean, well, I think because you have a lot to say in general. In a sense, a lot of interesting thing to say. Not that you want to to say a lot, but I think a lot of interesting thing. And I don't know because I met you or I read your interview. You play a lot of different games. You program and you design a lot of games. So I just want to start actually from just the playing perspective. What kind of games you play, and because you're not very niche actually in the you would expect that someone in the abstract community is very much into only abstract games, but that's not always the case, right?
Right.
How did you start? Like what was the first game that you played?
Lord, I mean, we're going back to childhood, which is at this stage 50 odd years ago, so it's hard to remember. But I mean, at the time, games were pretty basic. So my dad taught me chess. We had a few games that you'd find in W.H. Smith's kind of Monopoly type things, Scrabble. So I mean, I was always drawn to things with more skill than luck. But at that point in time, there wasn't a lot. And yeah, I suspect there's a universe in which I kind of got encouraged with chess at an early age and ended up as being kind of devoted to chess my entire life. But the way it worked out, wasn't really playing much in the way of games until secondary school. And then I found Dungeons and Dragons, and I found a bridge club and a chess club. And I think that was it for the next kind of 5 years or so, those three. But I mean, you think about it, that kind of covers quite a lot of territory in itself.
Yeah.
And
actually,
then,
sorry.
Yeah. No, Karen.
I was thinking actually more about the magic phase, but that came later, right?
Much later. I mean, we're still back in the 1980s at the moment.
Okay. Also, I'm not surprised, but I think I didn't know that you were playing bridge as well, which is definitely a skill game, but it's something that I wouldn't put in the abstract category, right?
The abstract, dangerous word.
I mean, we can talk for hours about it. So let's.
Yeah. So might as well address the elephant in the room whilst we're here. I mean, abstract means a lot of different things to different people, and it's sufficiently so that you see lots of arguments going nowhere because everybody's kind of entrenched in their view of what abstract is, and it kind of means games that I like to play that other people don't like to play in to many people.
Okay.
But for some, I tend to prefer combinatorial games or perfect information games, because those have a fairly clear resonance. Even then, I'm misusing the terms. Um, but because if you talk about combinatorial games, then the mathematicians would say, oh, well, it's got to end with one player unable to move, and it's got to be kind of either win or lose and no draws, or, there's different definitions there as well. So
Yeah.
any kind of classification is doomed to failure from the word go. And if anybody ever comes up with a perfect classification, then somebody's going to come along and design a game that breaks it, because that's what people do. They kind of push boundaries and things.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, makes sense. I guess my question then was how bridge, like, what do you like particularly about bridge, or what? Yeah, how bridge comes into this scenario.
okay, well, I think at the end of the day, I like solving puzzles. And every hand of bridge is a puzzle. First of all, you kind of set a contract, a number of tricks that you've got to win with imperfect information. You and your partner are trying to pass information to the other one, but through a constrained mechanism where
Mm.
everything you say kind of ups the ante and forces you to work that little bit harder. So the compromise between kind of managing the information you give away and what goals are actually attainable. So once you've kind of negotiated your contract, you then get to see both your hand and your partner's hand, which means you don't have quite perfect information, but you know exactly what cards you've got. You know exactly which cards the opponents have, um, and then you can kind of deduce where the remaining cards are and how to kind of maximize your tricks as the from the bidding and from the play. So it's a whole series of puzzles. Um, and yeah, puzzles. I like puzzles.
Yeah.
That's really
Okay.
it
Okay. Okay.
all comes down
Makes
to. It's
sense.
probably what this whole interview will come down to.
Makes sense. Makes
I can
sense.
stop now.
Yeah. I never really learned properly to play bridge. I know the idea
Mhm.
um, around it, and actually, I can't remember where I read it. Maybe it was a book, the Seven Games book. But like AI played quite a an interesting role in bridge as well, because it's a game you play in pairs. That compared to other combinatorial games where we are used to play against the AI,
Mhm.
for bridge it was used as a teammate, right? Like you can play with an AI against another player with an AI, which I
I
thought was
think I
something
think
interesting.
that's quite recent. I think.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
if you,
Yes. Uh,
I mean, there were attempts in the kind of 90s, I think, but they really weren't very good. And a lot of the programs at the time cheated under the hood. They had perfect information, and
okay.
they were pretended not to. Um,
It defeats the
but
purpose.
well, I don't know. I mean, what's the purpose of an AI? Is it to entertain? In which case, if it needs to cheat to reach human levels, is that a problem?
I know, okay, but it transforms the bridge into a perfect information game. Then it becomes something a bit
Well,
different.
still puzzles, but
Still,
different puzzles.
okay, okay, yeah. No, I just it just came to my mind. I didn't even. Well, this
Yeah.
was even planned, just to say, it was to
But
talk about bridge.
but I mean, the skills for bridge are closer to poker in many ways, which obviously has been kind of extensively studied, because
Mm-hmm.
you need to kind of model your opponent. Um, and yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and poker is probably more popular than bridge nowadays.
yeah,
At some point, bridge was having like a huge success, maybe in the
yeah.
80s.
If you go along to a bridge club now, then you won't find anybody under the age of about 50, I think. Most mostly 60s or 70s.
I've never been actually, but maybe. Um, okay, okay. Let's move on then to, because you said Magic came quite later, or Dungeons and Dragons probably.
Dungeons and Dragons was it came out in about 1976 or something like that,
Mm.
the first edition. So I was playing it all the way through school, and into university to a large extent, and
Because
that and other role playing games.
in D&D there's a bit less, it's a bit less puzzly, right? Less puzzle and more acting,
It
more role
depends.
play.
I mean, you're talking about now. You've got the Uprise Critical Role and things like this, which honestly give people unrealistic expectations.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back in time, then the people who are playing were kind of playing for like puzzles and things like much as everybody else.
Mm.
Again, you're dealing with imperfect information. You're dealing with kind of managing randomness and stuff. But um, a lot of adventures, there will be puzzles to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay. So
some,
you like that aspect a lot.
yeah.
Because I feel nowadays is it's more about the social aspect than the
Why would you do that?
I, I mean that's at least that's how I became more popular nowadays, I think. While Magic, I can see it. I played Pokemon for quite a while when I was a teenager.
Hmm.
I think Magic is the very first uh, trading card game with yeah, with a lot of strategy involved, even with imperfect information, but still like combinatory is crazy high, right? Because of the number of cards. Um, what you still play? Do you do like
Um, yes, I started playing 1994, early 1994. So Magic had been out for about 6 months at that point.
mm,
Um, I just missed all the kind of alpha and beta and unlimited cards, and came in just when unlimited was vanishing from the shops and revised was starting to take over. Um, but yeah, I've been playing off and on ever since, and uh, yeah, what I kind of have two hats here in Magic, because there's an old school community in London
mm-hmm,
where they actually play only with cards printed in 1993 and 1994.
mm-hmm,
So that's kind of a lot of nostalgia, and it's a simpler, purer version of the game as well, because with every set, you can't just print the same old cards, so you have to kind of increase the complexity one way or another.
mm-hmm,
Wizards have been quite good at managing this over the years. Is the game's still going 30 years on, but new modern cards are definitely more powerful and more complex than earlier cards. So that I like playing with the kind of really old cards.
mm-hmm,
Uh, there's a community in London, which I'm blessed, where you can actually kind of do that. It's called the Brothers of Fire, and they organise kind of events every few months, and I go along to those. But also, there's a local commander group, which is kind of the big popular format these days, which is 100 card decks with no duplicates in. So every card different.
I honestly
And
found it crazy. Now
that's kind of the other end of the scale, because every card usually has a paragraph of text on it, and the interactions become absolutely crazy. But it's kind of
it,
fun in a different way.
it kind of I don't know. It becomes hard to me to plan anything in advance. I mean, like for me, one of the nice aspect is also the preparation to how to prepare your deck, and it feels similar to me to when I was preparing openings playing chess or any other game, sort of. But then if you
Yeah.
play something like that instead without any, yeah, without like you have 100 cards that you have to
Yeah.
figure out basically as you go
But
on.
they are 100 cards that you have chosen and selected for synergy to work together.
Okay, okay. So
So I mean,
still,
it's not like you go in there with the 100 random cards. Though that could be fun too. But again, you wouldn't necessarily sing all the cards.
hmm
Um, when Commander started, it was something akin to what I liked about Bridge, because you to make a 100 card deck, you'd kind of have to throw in a whole load of junk cards that you wouldn't normally use in a kind of tournament or anything. Uh,
yeah.
and then on the fly, you kind of have to figure out the puzzle of how you make these cards work together. And sometimes you get these little aha moments where something kind of comes together. Um, these days, because there are so many cards printed, the decks actually get very consistent, because you might have 3 or 4 cards that do very similar things and can be used interchangeably. So a lot of the decision making has been pushed back to the deck building stage,
hmm
rather than the actual play stage, which I find a bit disappointing.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
but there's also limited, where you actually kind of everybody gets a booster. You take one card from it, you pass them on,
Mm.
um, and you build a small pool of cards from which you then build a deck, and then you play. And that's one of my favourite formats. I don't get to do it very often because the local people would much rather play Commander. But again, you've got two skill multipliers there. You've got the picking of the cards, you've got the building of the deck before you get to play.
Hmm.
And again, you've got this element of kind of playing with junk that you've got to somehow make work together, which I actually really enjoy.
Yeah, it makes
Um,
sense. I think I like it. But also, I guess you have to buy new cards every time. Or, well, you could use the random cards you already have.
yeah,
Okay, cool. Okay, let's get maybe more into the abstract now. Um, uh, how did you like? At some point, you start to design games as well.
yeah,
Um, because I think it's one of the most fun part of the kind of abstract games community, probably. Because I mean, if we don't design new games and we stay with a classical, there's it's fun, but there's not so much choice, right? There wasn't so much choice until some years ago.
yeah.
So how did you come up with like why did you want to start designing games? Or
Oh lordy. The first game I tried to design was probably whilst I was still at university, and at that point I had very little exposure to games, and certainly none of the modern games or anything like that. And it was objectively awful. You were actually kind of building circuits in a grid. Each person would take in turns to place something into a circuit,
mhm.
into the grid, and you were trying to light your lamp before your opponent got to light their lamp. If
Okay,
that makes sense.
there
So
was
that was the
some physics involved, sort of.
absolutely. I mean, why I thought that'd be a good idea for a game, I'm not entirely sure.
I mean, nowadays a lot of games that include elements of science and physical laws, or in general something from reality, some theme.
Yeah,
Um,
and again, when I started designing games, they weren't necessarily abstract either. They still aren't to some extent.
mhm,
Um, Abstract games, combinatorial games, are very simple, and it's actually very easy, comparatively speaking, to test an abstract game because it will generally play out the same each time up to a point. Um, Whereas if you've got a game with kind of cards, variable powers, all the fun stuff, then you have much more variance. So you've got to play a lot more games to get a feel about what the kind of worst case scenario is and best case scenario is for a start. Because you can have some starts that are just kind of broken in the sense that the game's unplayable, or some starts that are broken in the sense that the game is over too quickly.
mhm.
And finding the balance between the two takes a lot of testing, which is why most of the games I've designed along those kind of lines are still stuck in a drawer waiting for me to actually get back to them.
So you have
um,
also non-combinatorial games that.
well, I mean, you've maybe seen some of them. Nestor published the first game Nestor published of mine was Mutton,
Mhm.
with Cameron Brown, which is kind of werewolf for two players.
Okay,
Um, so
actually I didn't know about this.
okay, so it's kind of secret information. One player plays the wolf, or the wolves, and they are disguised as sheep. One player plays the farmer who's trying to protect the sheep in his field, and then each turn a wolf kills an adjacent sheep and then runs away. Um, and then the farmer takes a pot shot at a sheep, hoping it's a wolf, kind of thing. So it's kind of mastermind meets werewolf meets kind of combinatorial game in some ways. It's good fun.
Okay,
um,
how's it called again?
and mutton,
Mutton.
as in sheep
Yeah,
sheep meat.
yeah, yeah, okay, okay. Oh, sorry, now I got it.
Yeah, it is playable in AiAi, and AiAi does not cheat. Just for reference,
Yeah, we'll
yeah,
talk about it.
you can try that. And there's another one of mine which is Sleepers,
Hmm.
where you're playing pulling tiles from a bag, placing them face down the board, flipping them over, and when they flip over, you kind of get these combo effects going off, which kind of
Hmm.
and there's several different ways to win. So it's a kind of kitchen sink game with lots of different elements all thrown together. It actually works. Um, so yeah, I don't stick to kind of games of pure skill or anything by any means.
But do you test these also using software, AI, or when
Um,
you design, or you just stick to the idea and then maybe later on if it works?
so AiAi came along in 2013 or thereabouts. So games I've designed before 2013 were kind of I inflicted them on other people first, which includes Mutton, Crosshairs, a few others. But once I've got AiAi up and running, then yes, the first thing I do with an idea is I code it in AiAi and see how it plays, and then see how AiAi plays it. I can run 1,000 simulations and see whether it's balanced or um, what the patterns are like, how broken it is, how long the games are, all the desirable things for an
Mm.
abstract game. And then I can kind of tweak rules and things or just throw the thing away. And
Yeah.
there's actually a lot of my games in AiAi that I've never advertised anyway because they are objectively not very good.
Hmm.
Uh, and you may have seen I've got a page of my games on the web. Don't know if you have seen that.
Uh, the page
Um,
of
so
with all your games.
yeah,
Um, yeah. I mean, I'm on your website now. Actually, I could show it.
but yeah. If you look there, I think there's probably about 50 games or something stupid on there, and I've put the good ones up at the top, and then there's a whole section of kind of yeah stuff
Yeah.
down at the
So
bottom.
I've seen this before. I think where
Yeah,
you told me like four and crosshairs are the you one of some of your favorites. I think, right?
so two of my favourites. I mean, I'm actually playing a lot of Furl now. Somebody implemented it on
For
Abstract Play, um, and I've never had two games play out the same way. I'm really, really loving it. And despite being a small board, it's a 4 hex board. The games are actually kind of going to kind of 50, 60 moves, sometimes more amongst experienced players. There's actually a lot of depth there, and sometimes I even impress myself. Yeah,
how,
even when I was testing, I didn't realize just how much there was to the game.
how does Furl work? Actually, I wasn't sure about this.
Uh, uh, okay, so when I was designing it, the idea was that you had to kind of primeval forest or something. You had big tentacles rearing up and then slamming down and kind of hitting the enemy. But in essence, mechanically, if you take a sewing game like Mancala, where
Mm-hmm.
you kind of pick up pieces and then sew them, I've split that in two. So you can furl, you can take a line of pieces and stack them up, or you can unfurl, you can take a stack of pieces and you can kind of spread them out in a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the line, if it hits something, it can capture. And it's a simple race across the board, but um, there is
Yeah,
a lot going on there.
with this sewing mechanism, which
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably not very common to have this mechanism with a racing game, a race game.
No, I mean, possibly the closest is Murus Gallicus, if you know the one.
Say it again.
Murus Gallicus.
No, I know, no, I've never seen it.
Okay, again, it was published by Nestor and it's on a couple of sites. But you have kind of a single piece is kind of a centurion or whatever, can't move. A stack of two pieces is kind of a, oh, what's it called? Can't remember what it's called, but you basically move stacks of two pieces via a kind of sewing mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But by kind of covering your own pieces, you can kind of get moving stacks going on. Again, it's a race across the board type thing. Objectively, there are some similarities, but the games play out totally differently. Otherwise, I wouldn't have called it to design in the first place.
Okay, okay.
So,
It
um,
actually, there is on your website there's a list of games. It's infinite. Like I don't know how many games you design. um,
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I say.
four. Was how the idea of four came out? Is from the four color theorem, or
Absolutely 100%. It's kind of fascinating that you can take a map and you can color it using only four colors. And I've actually tried to design several games over the years based on that, and this is the most successful one. But over on gamers.net, you'll find a game called Chroma, which I designed with Cameron Brown again, which is a kind of strict placement game where you're trying to be the last person to move. But again, it's got the kind of um, same constraints to it that you can't have two colors next to each other. But it's a 3D stacking game, and it mixed feelings. It is interesting, but you seldom get many pieces above the first level. It's usually over too quickly. So, in retrospect, I wouldn't call it a great success. Though it's very pretty.
is it here somewhere in the list? Or
Oh yeah, it'll be down the bottom somewhere in the kind of games that didn't quite work.
oh my, yeah, it doesn't. It's endless.
Yeah.
Um, and also Crosshairs is one of your favorite, I think, right?
Says, yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'd call an elegant simulation. You've taken a kind of dogfight, or I've taken a kind of dogfight, and I've stripped it down to its bare essentials as a game of pure skill. So it kind of it's on the borderline between an abstract war game and a themed combinatorial game. Um, But yeah, that's really good fun. You get slow maneuvering where you're kind of building up your power, and then you get these big turns where you kind of shoot down half a dozen of your opponent's ships and things like that. And you've got
So,
this moment where there's kind of tension. If I don't do something now, I've lost, kind of thing.
hmm
So
and you have
um,
a number of action per turn, sort of, right? Depending on how high
yeah,
is your plane and
that's right.
the,
Height is movement.
the
That's
altitude,
the
yeah.
kind of essence of the thing. Um,
And was produced by Nestor Games as well.
yeah, for a while.
Um, okay, what other game? Oh, Nightline. Actually, I want to mention Nightline because I think also it's very so simple and elegant,
Yeah.
but it works.
I mean, that was the idea here. It's to kind of build the simplest game in terms of components as much as anything else. So you start with literally two stacks touching each other, and then the game kind of expands from there. Um, yeah,
I feel
it, it,
it's like the same idea of Twixt for connection game, but applied to a boardless game. I don't know. I have that.
yeah, it's the board stays connected, but it's more. You're trying to make a straight line, and of course, night moves do not want to make straight lines. So again, there's an element of a puzzle. How do I actually get the pieces to line up and stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
As you play, you'll see patterns. You can get little ladders forming and things like this.
and
And you've got some of the chess elements as well. You do have forks, as you'd expect with knights,
hmm
and you do have this concept of removing the guard, where you can make a threat in one direction to deplete your opponent's stack, so they then can't deal with a threat in the other direction.
hmm
There's quite a lot going on there. It's a good game for puzzles.
and yeah, I couldn't break it, right? Like there's no.
Well, actually, I an earlier version of the rules said that if you became stalemate, if you had no legal moves, then you won, which was intended to give the balance out any first player advantage by giving a slight edge to the second player under some circumstances. And I quickly managed to find that the second player could stalemate themselves by just moving one piece each out from each of the stacks until they had no legal moves.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that's a case where AI playing really paid off, because I wouldn't have noticed that otherwise. But yeah, I had to change that rule.
Okay, so currently you cannot win by still mating. Uh,
No, I can't remember what the current rules are, to be
I
honest.
think I have in front of me the one of Nestor Games, and I think it says if no one makes a winning line of four, then black wins. So I think
Okay. Uh,
if you finished moves, then the second
mhm.
player wins, I guess, or yeah, I
Oh,
assume. But anyway, yeah, I find it quite interesting. Also, you give a bit of strategy tips in this booklet, where you in the rule sheet as well. Watch out for ladders, or yeah, as you said,
yeah,
forks and some knight patterns.
yeah.
Uh, okay, what about a game that I think this some of your favorites and also quite up in the in your page. Uh, some other like niche games that you feel they they don't know they're less known, but you still you still like.
I mean, honestly, they are all niche games that nobody knows about. I don't go out of my way to publish any of my games or do anything with them. It's kind of I have this idea in my head that I have to get out and see how it works, and I kind of I don't see my games as being better or more important than anybody else's. So I don't push them or anything. And I think even my best games that Nestor published probably only have about kind of 30, 30 votes on Board Game Geek. Um,
I mean that
so most of them are still unrated, even the ones I like. So,
we know.
um, but but yeah, the ones at the top are the ones that I personally think are my best designs, not the ones that the people necessarily think are my best designs. And I think a lot of them nobody has even heard of at all. Like Itsy, I think I didn't even bother to post on Board Game Geek. So probably about 3 people in the world who actually played it if they haven't been kind of looking in AiAi. Um,
I've played Web of
oh,
Flies.
Chaos. Actually, Chaos is one that I feel
Chaos,
could do.
chair.
Yes, yeah, it's Chaos and Chess merged together. But basically, the idea is that a piece is defined by the combination of the color of the piece and the space that it's on. So everybody has access to all the colors. One person has square pieces, one person has round pieces. And at the beginning of the game, you can deal out some cards which say what the powers of each combination are. So every game is going to be completely different. And you can think of it as a chess variant, but a king is basically a piece on its own color. That's the king. So as long as you have at least one piece on its own color, you are still in the game. If you lose your last piece on its own color, you've lost. So it's
Wait, so this
chess
means
like.
you can have multiple kings if you have multiple.
Oh yeah, you can have as many kings as you want,
Oh wow!
but
And when you
obviously you then don't have access to the more powerful pieces. So yeah, chaos chess
but you have to
is
keep at least one king on the board at all
yeah,
times. You can't.
absolutely.
So even if you move the piece that was a king onto another square, that becomes another piece, right? Or because
Yes,
it's determined by the color of the piece and the color of the square as well.
yes, that's right.
So yeah,
I mean, that's really really good fun. I really like that one, and yeah, it doesn't get anywhere near as much play as it should.
do you find
Um,
that to be enjoyable, they have to be not too opaque as well, right? They have to be like the complexity is a value to a certain point, right?
yeah.
If it
So
becomes too high, then for humans hard to read, then
yeah, I'll come back to it again. I like puzzles. So I like a game where you get to a certain point and the game presents you with a puzzle to be solved. And in my view, that's kind of what a good abstract game is. It's where your players are kind of each setting each other puzzles, kind of now get out of that or whatever. So I like games with combos where you get kind of long, complicated sequences of moves. Um, where you can kind of say, aha, if I do this, then this, then this, then this happens, kind of thing.
mm,
Um, so yeah, a good game kind of doesn't just kind of progress from a beginning to an end and nothing exciting happens in the middle. There's always got to be some kind of
eureka
oh my
moment.
god, and even if it's in retrospect, oh my god, if I'd done that, then I would have won or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah,
I guess this what.
yeah. No, I see the point. Oh, so you kind of can I say that you enjoy more the tactics than the strategy? If I can maybe put some words in your mouth.
Um,
Not entirely
yeah,
correct,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Those are fighting words, I guess. Um, it's, I mean, strategy is necessary because without strategy, you've lost before you've begun, haven't you? Really. But um, yeah, if I've won the game before I've started, then I'd probably rather not have played. There has to be a point in the game where I guess there are
the winning combination.
tactically important decisions to be made. Um, yeah, because
I like the heuristics part as well a lot, right? Trying to understand when some
yeah,
typical ideas are correct, and then when actually there are exception to it, which many times is actually due to tactics, probably. Like it's a short term um, reward that
mhm,
cancel out the long term plan that you have or something like that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, is there like did you change the way you design game over the years? Like, do you find more fun some games nowadays than back then, or you use more theme, or
Um,
right?
okay, so I think there's always been a theme in my games, even if it's not visible to the kind of person looking at it. I don't say I'm going to design a game with. I'm not. I'm going to design a connection game. It's more. Um, oh, this is interesting. How do I actually make this into a game, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like Crosshairs is a classic example. You start with the concept of a dogfight between two planes or two armies, and at the time I played several and I found them disappointing. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, how do I make the game that Stephen would like?
Yeah, I mean,
um, but I mean, it started with a theme and it kind of worked backwards to the mechanical elements. And again, with things like four color theorem,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I know the game's inspired by the four color theorem, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you actually make that work as a game? And I had several attempts along the way, which were kind of very different to where it ended up. But um, yeah, kind of got there. Web of Flies, which is kind of another capturing game,
Mm-hmm.
was one that was spurred by a kind of article in a magazine, and it basically said if you start with a box of spiders, then pretty soon you'll just end up with one mean-looking spider because they're very territorial. And it was actually on the subject of making spider silk because spider silk is objectively very strong and has a lot of desirable properties. Um, but it's almost impossible to farm spiders. Eventually, I think they actually solved that by genetically modifying goats to produce spider silk inside them in their milk, so you can kind of milk the goats and then extract the spider silk. But that's another story. And anyway, but yeah, the web of flies started up as box of spiders, and you basically had a square board and loads of spiders, and they kind of fought until there's only one spider left. And then I transferred it to it was okay, but then I transferred it to a hex grid, and it suddenly became one hell of a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the endings, you've got a series of forced moves effectively, so you can see quite a long way ahead. It feels a little bit like SAR in some ways, the endings in SAR.
Mm-hmm. Uh,
But
Now that you mentioned, sorry, Zerts is one of your favorite games, I think, that you didn't design, or the one, or one of those that you have actually some good experience, and you have also on your page uh, like some strategy tips, and I feel that also quite forcing, right? It is one of, yeah, like again very tactical, or
you say tactical, but what actually happens is you reach a point and you say, I need, say, three white balls to win. Um, and then you work backwards from that and you actually build up a sequence of maybe 10 forcing moves, each of which involves giving your opponent a ball, leading to a victory. So I wouldn't say that's tactical. I'd say that's more strategic.
Okay.
Um,
I
um, so the strategy is I need to get this, and then you work backwards to the goal. So I guess that
Okay, maybe it's just a matter of definition. I don't know. I see when I need to see 10 moves in advance, I wouldn't call it strategy, right? If I have to calculate in advance, but I guess if you have to see that, you need to have the strategic principle of, okay, I need these three white balls, and I have to. So you need to have a plan first to implement then the plan, I guess.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, but yes, I originally published that article for Abstract Games magazine. It was serialized over a number of issues,
mhm,
and then I kind of put it together on the web a few months later. But at the time, the standard game of Zerts was actually um, it was actually a standard hex grid. It didn't have the kind of extended sides that's used now. Um, so it's very useful for people, but it's not quite in line with the current rules.
mm. Did you implement AiAi on certs, or
Um, no,
I mean certs on AiAi? Sorry.
I actually asked Chris Byrne at one stage whether I could actually implement the whole series, because you know one of his ideas was that Zerts has the original game GIP, which is a brilliant game by the way, comes with potentials, so you can actually kind of play with these additional pieces. But to use the power of the additional pieces, you have to play a sub game. So you start playing GIP, and then you get a challenge in the middle, and you have to go and play a game of Zerts or something
Mm,
in order to use this extra piece, kind of thing. Um, and I was actually looking to implement the whole lot, all of the games with the potentials and everything. But unfortunately, Chris said no. Um, Apparently, he has a kind of deal with um, a site or a publisher or something, which kind of precludes him from
mm.
um, giving me the rights to those.
But you known him for quite a long time, right? Like
Um,
you've.
yeah, I was a fanboy. I picked up a copy of GIP when it came out. It was in my local shop, and I popped in there, and the guy in the shop said, "Oh, I think you'll like this." I
Mm-hmm,
thought, "Hey, wow!" Um, so I dropped him an email saying, "Kind of really like this game," and he invited me over, and I actually kind of spent a couple of days with him in Belgium, and I ended up kind of play testing um, quite a few of his games. So Zerts, Tamsk, Dvon, um, one, two others, which I don't think I've ever seen the light of day. But yeah, and the reason that the Devon board is actually kind of long and thin,
mm-hmm.
because I kind of found a way of actually kind of controlling the edge of the board and strangling the opponent. So you never actually got any isolations and things because the board just kind of shrank from the middle to the center. So the new shape of the board is basically to encourage bits to fall off and kind of the game to function as he saw it rather than as I played it.
So there is
Yeah,
your contribution, let's say, drop
yeah.
contribution.
I still have a square Von board somewhere,
Oh, okay.
uh, a regular hex Von board somewhere,
Just
which
just
is
just to explain to people, I mean, if they've never seen it, Give project is a series of 7 games, I think, by now, by Chris Brum, that are very minimalistic, I could say, very abstract in the sense that actually there is no team for real, um, and they're all quite different. So they play in a very different way, very different mechanics. Um, what GIF was the first, or
Yep was the
yeah,
first,
GIF
yes.
was the first, and then yeah, if you find you can find easily online GIPF. I think my favorite is Inch. I have to say. Um,
Yeah, I don't like that one so much to be honest.
I don't know why I feel.
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. Also, for some time, I've been thinking about um, using the Othello mechanics flipping in some games, and I thought that was quite a nice way to put it into a game.
yeah,
But anyway, but they're quite different, so I think everyone finds some good ones, some that liked most. That yeah. Actually, can we talk a little bit about AI? Because
oh yeah.
we've mentioned it a couple of times, but what is exactly, and how did you come up with the idea? And
Okay, so um, yeah, let's go back a few years. Around about 2000, year 2000, I worked for zillions of games for a while. Um, so this is kind of possibly the first real general game playing program in many ways.
zillions of
It
games.
zillions of games. It comes with a language called ZRF, Zillions Rules Format, which is kind of based on Lisp. But it's basically both the original designers were chess engine programmers, and they basically used their knowledge to come up with something that would play just about any chess-like game, and then they extended it to play a wide variety of other games.
Mm-hmm.
Though their prejudices do show through because there's not really any built-in support for connection games. So, but it's a complete language. You can do just about anything in it. So you can program connection games. It's just quite a lot of extra work. And again, they didn't put any support for integers in. So if you want to count anything, that's quite a lot of work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, when this came out, I thought, hey, wow, I got a copy and I started coding games for it. And then at one point, I kind of sent my CV and I worked for them for a little while. But yeah, this was kind of the first. And few years later, I ran into Cameron Brown online. What do you think? Is it? Yeah, it might have been before. I was a bit wibbly wobbly when you get that back that far.
Mm-hmm.
But um, a few years after that, he was basically working in academia as a research assistant at Imperial College. They had a computational creativity group he was part of. And he's kind of looking at games in conjunction with UCT.
Mm-hmm.
And he persuaded me to start doing a PhD.
UCT is just a
Oh, sorry. So the years, and it's always been kind of deeply rooted in games at its heart because just about anything can be expressed as a game. So if you can kind of get it to play a game, you can get it to solve optimization problems. You can get it to do various other things as well. Anyway, so some of the first real successes were with alpha beta search, well, minimax, should we say, where you basically scan the tree, and if you get a good result from one node, then you can kind of dismiss worse branches elsewhere and keep on drilling down the tree based on the good values, which is very powerful, but you need to know what a good position is in a game,
so you need a good
which is where
heuristics
heuristics
implemented.
come
Yeah.
into this. And for a lot of games, there are no good heuristics, or at least the cost of calculating good heuristics is so expensive computationally that you lose any benefits you'd gain from the algorithm. So later on, somebody came up with a paper about minimizing regrets in one-armed bandits. And the idea is that if you're in a casino and you've got a whole load of one-armed bandits where you can just pull the lever and get some money out,
Mm-hmm.
how how do you find the one that pays out best, and how do you get the most money from it? We won't kind of talk about the kind of overall gambling things and why it's a bad idea to even start, but but what they found was that there was an algorithm which kind of balanced exploration, trying new things, with exploitation, using the same one over and over again to get the maximum benefit. And it's kind of got a nervousness function built in. So if you keep on doing the same thing for a while, gradually the weight of on doing something else gets higher and higher and higher until you say, well, okay, I need to go and kind of um, quench my guilt or
Mm-hmm.
nervousness and go and do something else for a while and then come back to this one later if it's still the best. Um, anyway, in essence, that's the algorithm. That's UCB um, per confidence something or other. Um, and then if you apply that to kind of drilling down a tree of game moves and things, um, then each branch of the tree gets its own kind of function that says, is this a good branch or is this a bad branch? And at the top levels, you can kind of pour more computational power into the moves with the best payouts and build the tree very asymmetrically, some results. But the real benefit of this is you don't need heuristics because you can just play games out to the very end and get a win or lose result um, more or less randomly and then trickle the value back up the tree. So
Is what else Monte Carlo tree search also
yeah,
does.
Monte Carlo tree search is the general term,
Mm.
but UCT is the actual weighting that's given to the different moves. Um, and yeah,
Because that's what's mostly used nowadays, right, for the modern AI, like deep learning and.
so at the time, UCT had just been used to get some good results in Go.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it was really trendy, and they got a grant from the EU to kind of
Mm-hmm.
explore what you could and couldn't do with this. So I kind of grew out of that the PhD. Um, Started off, the idea was to spend a year building a general game player,
Mm-hmm.
and then actually kind of do independent bits of research. And I was going to do kind of benevolent AI and stuff like this. But I ran into some personal stuff, and I kind of ended up dropping out of the PhD. Uh, and that was it for a couple of years or so. And then I dusted off the code and started expanding it, um, but not with any research in mind, but really just kind of so I had somebody to play games with
Yeah.
as much as anything else.
Entertainment. Sure, why not?
So most of the pretty graphics you'll see are actually Kevin Brand's work because
Mm-hmm.
he's got a background in graphics, and most of the kind of games and AI stuff is my work.
So the Cameron Brown project Ludai also is it comes from zillions of games in a way.
Um, it's also a kind of iteration on the ideas that we had when we were kind of putting together AI in the first place. So yeah,
Because I find also always fascinating the idea of having a language, right, to code games, and it's basically putting ludemes together, right? Like
yeah,
little, and in the same way, uh, um, yeah, like it's the equivalent of genes in for
yeah.
games, sort of.
I mean, very much this is what Cameron had in mind with his project, and he was the idea was to model ancient games, um, but also look at modern versions of ancient games. So, for example, things like backgammon have spread all over the world, and there's lots of different versions of them.
Mm-hmm.
But there were early games from which they kind of grew, and lot of the time, the ancient games we've lost the rules. Physical things like boards, um, pieces. They kind of turn up in pharaohs' tombs and kind of archaeological digs and things like this.
Mm.
But nobody really bothered to write the rules down in a permanent form because everybody knew how to play. So why would you? And that there's references in was it Nordic sagas apparently have this story of two cousins who were playing a game and one of them got so angry that they killed the brother or cousin or whatever. Um, and there's lots of description, but they didn't actually kind of describe how to play this game, so we have only a vague idea what it is. Probably TOEFL or something TOEFL like. Um, but yeah, the idea was to model the current versions of these games and played in different regions around the board and try and trace them back to common ancestors and verify that they actually worked as games along the way. So that was the Maastricht project. That's what Ludi was.
And
In.
then did he work in a sense? Like, did they find a common ancestor, like starting from the rules of the games?
Don't know. I was only there for the coding.
Okay, okay. It's quite interesting. It's what I
Yeah,
think is called, or some people call archaeoludology or something like that.
yeah. That was the term
Just
they
to
called
use,
it. Yes.
to coinate a new term. um, yeah, no, quite interesting. Maybe I should have a chat with Cameron Brown at some point.
You should.
I actually met him once. Yeah, you actually
Yeah.
introduced each other, and our meetup in London.
Hmm.
Um, I just want to ask one thing about AiAi, because
Just
I
one.
oh yeah, I mean as many as you as you like. It's just that we talked a little bit about this before because I was interested in the first player advantage as a concept in general, and I also use it in this course that I'm doing at Imperial College.
Hmm.
And I found quite interesting the skill ladder uh, idea. I mean, I know it's not your idea, but I see it
Well,
implemented in.
it's kind of my idea. As implemented, it's my idea.
Okay,
There's several different versions of the same kind of thing, but I realised in I had a chance to actually do something which is kind of fairly rigidly defined, and um, only for very small games because I don't have the computational power to do larger games. But
okay.
yeah,
Can you actually explain a little bit what the skill ladder is and how is that useful?
okay. So what I did was brackets for very small games, which I'll stop saying now. Um, I started with pure UCT, which has the advantage of not having any heuristics, so it doesn't. It's no bias. It just plays out games, gets a randomly gets a result, trickles those back up the tree, and kind of builds a weighted graph based on which moves give the best rewards. So there is nothing in there which has any kind of human opinion about how good a game is, um, or anything that could bias the results, which is very important, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It also converges to perfect play, given sufficient processing cycles, which is also fairly important. And what I did was I basically started with one. Well, the way you control it is through the number of iterations and number of times that you traverse the tree to get a result. So I started at the very bottom with just one play out, which is effectively coin toss at this stage. You chose a move; it was either good or bad.
Completely random.
Um,
Yeah.
and I use that as the kind of minimum level of intelligence, as it were. And then I started increasing the number of iterations until I got a stage where one version was winning a significant number of games against the other version. I think I chose 1/3, 2/3, or something like that for the split. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But the objective is that one version of the AI is objectively stronger than the other, according to a fixed measure. And then having got the kind of second tier, I then use that as the starting point and then increase the number of iterations until we get to third tier, where again the new AI is winning 2/3 of the time against the old AI, and then that's my new tier, and I keep going up. And the idea is first player advantage, second player advantage, whatever, is a complete fiction. You probably heard me say this because ultimately all of these games that we love, with no randomness, have a true value. Either it's a win for the first player, or it's a win for the second player, or it's a draw. And with perfect play, if you kind of have a complete algorithm of how to play the game, you could play a perfect game every time and get the same result. So it's not biased; it's solved. Anything else, you've actually got a human filter of what constitutes a good move and what constitutes a bad move, and you can't necessarily separate the human prejudices from the game. So one of the things this was to do was to explore that, to say, well, you've got this game that's winning 2/3, that's winning 2/3 against the other one. what does that relate to in terms of first player advantage and stuff like that? What does a completely objective, or not, yeah, completely objective game player think of this first player advantage thing?
Hmm.
And then we kind of increase the levels, and we can plot the first player advantage as the uh, playing strength increases until we get to the place where we've got perfect play, and we're actually kind of always getting the same result. And there are no more levels of play because level of play doesn't exist when you're playing perfectly. There's nothing better than that.
I'm showing it now on the screen. So
Oh,
you
sure.
see the blue line is the first player win rate, and the yellow line is the second player win rate, and the red one is the draw rate. Actually,
I can't see that, so I'm not quite sure which graph you're looking at.
oh
But
yeah, no, sorry, I'm not sharing with you. It's on YouTube though.
no,
People
yeah,
are seeing it, but you know these graphs by heart.
yeah, but
um,
there are lots of.
no, a couple of comments slash questions. So, um, well, yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. Of course, that's how it is. It's a it's a human feature, the first player advantage. That's it. It's an artifact of our being imperfect,
Yeah,
and but it I feel it's important because of that as well, in the sense that if we'll never be able to play and with optimal play, it's interesting to see how different like players with different skills perceive the game in different ways. Well, for example, for chess, the the trend could be probably quite monotonic, like increasing the skill level, also the first player advantage, the perception of the first player advantage
mhm,
increases. But so I was curious to see if this is valid for other games or not. And actually, looking at your graphs, there are very different kind of trends, right? There are some
yeah,
where um, increases, then decreases, non-monotonic at all. Like you see sometimes that
yeah,
yeah, the AI decides that, I guess, it kind of discovers new strategies, if we want to put it in a metaphorical way, and and for the first player and then for the second player, so they go up and down until they stabilize at the end with optimal
yeah,
play. Um, so one of my first thought was, can I use this to actually can people use this to predict what's the optimal play, optimal result of a certain game? Like,
mhm,
is the first player win or a second player win, or it's a draw, if
yeah,
without solving it. So basically, ultra weakly solving it, sort of. I don't even know if that's correct, but if this behavior is not very monotonic, you don't know exactly where you are in the graph, sort of,
yeah.
right? And for more complex games, you don't know how close you are to optimal play either. How do you know? Because even here for this very simple game, how do you know that you reached optimal play? Um,
Well, absolutely. You kind of don't. Um, all we can really say with confidence is we cannot find any more levels of play above this point. So
okay.
if we hold, um, yeah, I can also the version of UCT that AiAi usually uses is not standard UCT. It's actually got a solving algorithm as well, so it can perfectly solve games. So I can run in parallel my other AI,
Hmm.
and I can say, well, at this point, the other AI has actually solved this game, or whatever that's worth. Um, but but yeah, I warn people because there is this tendency to think that AIs are godlike, and that once you spot a trend, that trend is a true thing forever afterwards. But my experiments have led me to believe that it's not. It's very dangerous to actually kind of infer. Okay, AI says this game has a 55% win rate for whites or first player or whatever, to infer that that's actually a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
As say, it's all a fiction anyway. There is no such thing as a kind of percentage win rate. Either it's a one for white or it's not. But secondly, as the AI strength and thinking strength increases, you could find very different behaviour. I mean, if you think of it, something like NIM, for example, it's a classic example from all the textbooks and things where you're just kind of taking away matchsticks from a board or whatever. And it looks like an interesting game until you know that there's an algorithm that lets you play perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
in which case there's no game at all. And noughts and crosses. Most people will know that if you play in the centre, you can't lose, and if your opponent makes a mistake, you can win. But you know, if you're kind of 6-year-old on the playground, you don't know that kind of thing. There's actually a game there. So, yeah,
Yeah, I understand.
it's
The
yeah, it's very difficult to say anything definitively about games,
yeah,
unfortunately.
and also, I mean, yeah, finding the optimal play or like resolving the game have might have no and most of the times doesn't have any practical value for the way we
Yeah.
play. So I know it's more an academic exercise trying to think, oh,
However, what I would say is one of the things that AiAi Canon does do in its reports is it actually investigates mirror play. So if player 2 exactly copies player 1's moves,
mm-hmm.
um, does player 2 win or draw? Is there a kind of advantage to doing that? And similarly, if player 1 plays in the centre and then copies player 2's moves, is there an advantage? Because that's a broken game. If there's a simple strategy that you can use to guarantee a result.
Yeah, okay. So you check the simulation afterwards. That's what you mean. Like after the AI has carried
Yeah,
tons of games itself, you would look at
yeah.
what kind of strategy he has implemented to, and if like
Mm.
yeah, symmetric strategy or other simple ones are possible to solve the game and broke the game. Yeah, no, I just find it quite interesting. Actually, another question I think you said before, but how do you define the skill ladders? So you increase the computational power, like in terms of just
So
time you run the or
number of iterations which you can control
number iteration.
precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's based on time, then you don't know what else is going on your computer, and you don't know what's doing clock cycles and things.
Yeah.
So again, with UCT, each iteration is kind of a complete play out through the tree, and each one builds as the node on the tree as you go. So you can objectively say that with 10 iterations, you are more powerful than with one iteration, kind of thing.
Because you have done all this with your computer, right? Like you didn't use clusters or other like because
No.
I assume the more complicated games could like this kind of graphs could be done also for more complex games.
Oh yeah,
Assuming
I
you
mean,
have the power.
absolutely. If you have a supercomputer, you can probably do more. But I mean, the complexity tends to grow exponentially because if you say you have a 3x3 game and you change it to a 4x4 game, you've not only increased the number of options where you can play by 16 over 9, but you've also increased the number of moves before the end of the game potentially by about 16 over 9 as well. So in relation to the kind of one side of the board, it's kind of a power of 4 relationship almost with the kind of
Yeah.
amount of work that an AI has to do. So yeah, it's not quite that, but it varies from game to game, but rough hand waving type thing. Increasing the size of the board makes things a lot harder for the AI or most other similar technologies.
Cool.
Which is it's why I always think that there's a bit of a cop out going on when a designer kind of starts with an enormous board and says, here's a good game. My design philosophy is always to start on the smallest board that makes for an interesting game. People can go from there if they like, but it's aesthetically, the smaller the board where you can actually have an interesting game, the happier I am with the design. that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel with
Um,
a bigger board, you kind of artificially uh, inflate the complexity, sort
yeah,
of, I- or
absolutely. Yeah.
or you mix like the complexity with actually the game just being opaque or just being too. Yeah, I don't know. Like it doesn't necessarily make it like playing Go on a 19 by 19 board is fine, but playing on a
Mhm.
50 by 50 board is probably too much, right? So yeah, you have to
For
find.
humans at the moment. Yeah, I mean that is an interesting example because um, I mean there's a saying, lose your first 100 games as quickly as possible,
Hmm.
which I take to mean start playing on a very small board and work your way up, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
9 by 9, 13 by 13, and then you're ready for the big time. But most people just want to jump in at the deep end.
Hmm.
Uh, I find, um, but also I think at the top levels, people have been talking about moving to a 21 by 21 board because the game is um,
Okay, I didn't know about this.
just a few points between the top players. But Go's not my speciality. I may be misinterpreting this.
Yeah, yeah, I found it very crazy that even 19 by 19 is not enough for that someone has kind of cracked or finds not
Yeah,
boring, but like yeah, like
it,
kind of feeling that in you have in chess when they introduced Fisher random because the opening theory was getting stale and memorization and everything. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, most of the games that we play, I think, are more niche. I don't have this problem, these problems yet.
well, these are problems that come from a game being very successful and being highly analysed.
Yeah,
And most of the games we play just don't have that kind of large community associated with them.
yeah. Actually, speaking of which, um, yeah, I want to talk about the board game scene nowadays. So we have been trying to kind of expand a little bit the the abstract game scene community, right, in London,
Hmm.
uh, with alternating success. um, and mean on the board game geek forum where like regularly comes up the question why people are not so much um, into puzzles, into abstract games as we are, um, and also I think there was a post on BGG as well, and something by Nick Bentley who mentioned that um, in the past few years there's been like a trend of more cooperative games or more thematic games, which kind of goes also a bit away from uh, a little well thematic, not necessarily, but cooperative games is something kind of new that it wasn't it wasn't very much used and known until maybe 10, 20 years ago. So I don't know. Did you see some like uh, trend in
Okay,
behaviors?
there's a lot in there. So first of all, I don't think games of pure skill are ever going to be popular. Um, so if you've got a large community for a single game like chess, um, then you have the benefit that you can always find somebody at your level. So you can go into a chess club, you can say my rating is 1800, and somebody else will wander over with a similar rating, and you'll have an interesting game.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's chess, so maybe not. But if you take one of our strange games that nobody's heard of, apart from a very small community, the odds are one person will be significantly better than the other person. Um, and there's something slightly dispiriting, I think, about losing all the time. You need a certain type of personality to say, hey, wow, I learned something from this. It wasn't the outcome, but I went into this game and now I know more. I can see where I went wrong. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain type of personality, I think, where losing is good because you've learned something, and maybe if you win without learning something, that's actually quite disappointing.
Hmm.
But you still need some kind of basis for comparison between the players, because if I played a six-dan Go player, for example, I would lose the game without ever knowing what I did wrong.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that takes the fun out of it as well, a little bit.
and then what have I been doing for the last hour? If I play somebody who's a bit better than me, I'm going to lose. That's absolutely fine. At the end of it, I will say, well, okay, it came down to this fight and this fight, and yeah, next time I can kind of do better. So, um, yeah, that's one of the things about abstract games, and also that's an interesting point. Um, Santorini's got an app.
Hmm.
Santorini, for anybody who's not aware, it's one of the big successes in the abstract games world because it came out with little chibi pieces and very pretty,
Yeah.
and was a very, very successful Kickstarter. So through various reasons, AiAi, or code from AiAi, actually kind of forms the basis for the AI in the app.
Hmm.
And in our initial iterations, the complaint was this is too strong, because people are just going to kind of lose and become dispirited. So
Interesting.
um, yeah,
So the
so we actually,
level was lowered on purpose to make it more. To
well, I mean, even just playing heuristically was too strong for some people. So there's some interesting techniques in there which I won't go into to actually. And the other guy who was involved was actually kind of partially responsible for what we used in the end. But yeah, there's some interesting things in there to actually kind of dumb down the AI and make the AI um,
introducing
at a
some
more,
flaws.
yes, absolutely flaws, at a more kind of comparable level for human beings. I think it's only the highest levels that you don't have those. But yeah, if you play in AI, then you can actually kind of play against the full strength version. No pretty graphics, of course, but um, yeah. So one of the things I came across was this concept of rubber banding, um,
Mm.
which is the
Rubber
idea
banding.
that the AI will try and play a move which is just slightly better than the current position. So if it has a choice between 5 moves, and one of them is kind of draw, and one of them is slightly above draw, it will take the one slightly above draw,
Uh-huh.
but it won't take
The
any of
best
the
one.
ones above that, which are kind of devastating or kind of clearly guaranteeing a winning position or anything.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so that was interesting experiment, because the feedback we got from that uh, was that it's like being beaten by an idiot. It just seems to make random moves,
Hmm.
um, until it wins,
Okay.
which is um, kind of fun. And you will actually find it in the advanced options in AiAi under the name, I think, Drunken Master. Um, so the idea is the kind of martial artist who kind of lurches all over the place, being drunk, and somehow manages to defeat the enemy regardless, which is um, yeah.
I think.
So yes, you can find that and play against that in AiAi if you like. There's a lot of hidden options in there if you are brave enough to explore them.
I think Santorini is a good example.
Yeah,
First because yeah, it came with like a pretty board and some good design, like a graphic, and so people
yeah,
enjoyed that side as well. But also because it's abstract, that adds also some a little bit of personalization, customization
mm-hmm.
aspect with the initial like and asymmetry with the powers of the god,
Asymmetry is what you're looking for. Yes.
with the power of the gods, which again is another thing that probably attracts more people, like makes people stay playing the game. They feel they have more odds
Yeah.
against someone else who's
Yeah. You
strong.
can also give an object a power that people believe is more powerful to the weaker player as a catch-up mechanism.
Hmm.
I phrase that carefully because the powers that are actually more powerful is not necessarily the same as the powers that people think are more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Again, you've got this whole human thing coming in. The chap Michael von Biesbrook, I think his name was, who it's one of the few people who've actually collaborated inside AiAi. I did a version of Santorini originally, based on the original version of the game, which is um, which is not balanced in terms of powers. And he kind of took it over, added a lot of the new powers and things like this, but then also used AI to balance the powers. You'll find an article about that on the web somewhere. But he did a hell of a lot of work on Santorini in AI to actually kind of try and find out how balanced the powers were, which had edges against the others. And if you look in the rule book, you'll see the rule book actually has kind of tables of which ones work well together and things,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually a result of his efforts.
Sorry, extra bonus question. Now I think about it, if Santorini is played in the combinatorial way, so without gods, would expanding the board make it a better game, or I feel I feel like it's one of the cases where it might not be true. Like the movement of the
Yeah.
pieces is limited, so I feel like it would be a longer game, but not necessarily more fun.
Well, now you're into Qualia, aren't you? So for some people, I'm sure the experience of playing on a bigger board will be more to their tastes.
Mm.
But I think the amount of interaction is going to go down, because the whole point of the small board is that you can't get away from your opponent to build a kind of tower and climb up on top of it
Mm.
without them being able to interact with you and cap it off or stop you from climbing up to the winning level.
Mm-hmm.
As the board increases, the amount of interaction is going to go down. So you'd need to address that either with extra pieces or by choosing powers that kind of give you more movement options
Mm-hmm.
or something. More interesting question would be: does it work on a 4x4 board? Um,
Yeah, the odd even problem as well, right?
oh, possibly, or 3x3 board even. But
I know I
one
was
piece each.
I was thinking of having a center or not having a center. If that, I think that could make an impact.
Well,
Uh,
yes, but which way? I would like to say. Um,
yeah, have you tried to implement it on 4x4?
no, I haven't.
Okay.
No, I haven't. But yeah, this is the way I think I'd start by trying to shrink it down rather than make it bigger. See what happens.
Interesting. That would be interesting actually. I guess 4x4 is already small enough to maybe not solve it, but to become a bit
Mm-hmm.
more trivial.
Maybe.
I mean,
Maybe we should try it next
maybe
time.
I overestimated my capacity of analyzing. But yeah, okay, interesting. I don't know. Is there anything else? I think I covered most of the things I wanted to talk about. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I think it's quite enough. Well, what are all are all games the one behind you? Just to
Oh
because
well.
uh, because you used to sell some of those, right?
Oh
Or
yes. This goes
sorry,
back to about 1990s. So early days of the internet. I had a kind of online shop called Game Sale.
mm-hmm.
And basically, I'd kind of go around charity shops and car boot sales and things, and I'd find games, and then I'd kind of check they were complete and put them up for sale. It it was kind of a hobby because I got to find games for myself that I'd never seen otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
and I made some interesting contacts around the world as well. So I had people in America sending me games, and I was sending games to people in America and various other places. Um, so yeah, it was
So
good fun, and I found a lot of really obscure stuff. But ultimately, I'm a computer programmer. I can make more money in 1 hour doing that than I can in several hours of trading in used board games.
not
Um,
you mean not programming games? I mean maybe as well, but you have as
by,
well a
by
job
buying and
like
selling, yes, which is kind of the tragedy, because there's a lot of things I could do, but there's only one of them
Yeah,
pays well.
they're not as profitable. That's a shame. I know what you
Yeah,
mean.
it's like I bake absolutely delicious chocolate cakes, and every now and again I get somebody saying, "Oh, you should sell these." And I think, well, cost of the ingredients, cost of my time,
Competition.
um, com- yeah. So yeah, I'd make kind of £5 an hour doing that or something like that. So, it's,
It's okay.
yeah,
It's good. Sometimes things
well,
stay as a hobby, and some others.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what really killed the kind of game sale thing was the eBay when it came along, because up till that point I had a bit of a reputation, I had my own sites and things like that. And then you go on eBay and anybody's selling anything,
Mhm.
and it's very difficult to compete with that kind of thing, what it was back in the day. So I kind of
Yeah. So,
packed up shop at that point.
so
Um,
you were basically yeah, gathering from different sources and then redistributing
yeah,
some games.
well,
But
absolutely. I mean, it was basically a games rescue in a way. It was finding unloved games and
mhm.
getting them to people who actually kind of loved them and stuff. Um,
I find it really positive in general because I have the feeling that nowadays there are so many new board games produced that it's like a bit of a waste of resources and a bit of
yeah.
a um, yeah, it's not sustainable from the environmental point of view, from many points of view. I don't know. I feel it's getting a bit out of control. Probably with the pandemic, it got even worse with a lot of Kickstarters and stuff. I understand the joy of collecting and to finding like having the new game and trying it out, but I also know a
Mhm.
lot of people who actually have like a room full of new games, not old games they rescue, just new games they just bought and played once. And I don't know, but also I enjoy playing fewer games but analyzing more in depth. So I guess it's yeah, it's not everyone.
Yeah,
It's like
this is down to your kind of exploit versus explore again. There's a are you missing out on new good games by kind of focusing on the older games? Um,
do you feel like that?
it depends. I mean, it depends which hat I've got on. So, I mean, abstract games of pure skill, do benefit from kind of repeated play. But a lot of the games I play are um, what's the word? Ameritrash was the old term for it. Strongly themed games. Things like Zombicide
Okay.
and all the Simon games with lots of miniatures and things like that. Um, and very often there's a narrative, so you can play through the different scenarios, um, and there's a story going on.
Hmm.
But once you've finished, you finished. You can pass it on to the next player or whatever,
Yeah.
because there's kind of 30 scenarios or whatever,
Replayability low,
and then
let's
it's
say.
done. Yeah, but I mean, then you think of it as being more like watching a movie or something like that. If you go to the cinema and watch a
Hmm.
movie, you pay what, probably about 15 quid a ticket these days, something like that. Haven't been
Yeah.
for a long time. So that's 30 quid for 1.5 hours enjoyment for two people. Um,
Yeah.
if you have the game of those forms, you're probably going to play for what, probably 100 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
And the cost per player per hour is actually quite small, so you can justify it. Um,
Yeah. I was thinking more of the waste of the material itself. Uh,
yeah,
because I mean, £30 for an experience, and it's fine. People go to concerts, and I pay for that as
actually,
well.
one person goes to a concert these days. The ticket prices are crazy.
Yeah, also, but I understand that. But then, yeah, I have this box at home that yeah, I probably have to resell it and give someone else. But
Yeah,
probably renting games. I'm not sure. I think at some point there was some board game cafe in London that were
it,
had some rental
yeah, it's a difficult
service.
concept because pieces are going to get lost, and people are not going to return the games. I would be very surprised when you could make a profit doing that, to be honest.
Mm.
But good luck to them if they're taking.
No, I don't. I don't know many of it, but I think I've seen somewhere trying to do something like that. But yeah, I guess if it's not so popular, there must be a reason for that. Anyway, okay. It's been an hour and a half, so I think thank you so much for for this chat. Really interesting, as I was sure it would be.
No worries.
And see you again, hopefully soon in person, playing some other new games in Waterloo Station.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.